I never imagined my own son would shove me so violently at the Christmas dinner table that I would fall to the floor in front of the whole family, just so his father-in-law could take my place. What he didn't know was that on that very night, I would change his life forever. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. When he woke up the next day, 47 missed calls would be waiting for him, because sometimes consequences arrive not with a bang, but with the quiet, devastating efficiency of a wire transfer reversal. My name is Victor Sterling. I'm 70 years old, and I spent my entire life building Sterling Group, an energy and commodities behemoth that powered half of the Gulf Coast. I lost my beloved wife, Eleanor, 5 years ago, and since then, my son, Alec, became the only immediate anchor in my sprawling, lonely world. Well, that's what I thought, until the night of December 24th. That afternoon, I arrived at Alec's sprawling, modern glass and steel house in the Houston suburbs with a heart that was heavier than usual, but full of effort. I had bought ludicrously extravagant gifts for my grandchildren, Lucas and Eliza, and I brought a rare, $5,000 bottle of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon, the last of a case I'd been saving for an occasion that truly justified its complexity. The house was decorated with the kind of minimalist holiday decor that lacked any warmth, but the aroma of roast duck, not lamb, Alec always insisted on duck, filled the sterile air. "Grandpa Victor!" the children shouted, a welcome that briefly felt genuine. Lucas, at 15, was already a towering shadow of the man his father used to be, while Eliza, 12, still managed to cling to my neck, her small hands holding on to the old man she barely knew but instinctively trusted. Their sincere, uncomplicated hugs were the only moment of unalloyed happiness I would experience that night. Serafina, my daughter-in-law, greeted me with a smile that felt less like joy and more like a precisely calibrated corporate welcome. There was always something in her eyes, the eyes of a financial analyst who saw everything in terms of valuation, that made me deeply uncomfortable, as if she were mentally auditing my net worth while I spoke. "Hello, Victor. So good you could arrive before the others." Alec appeared from the vast kitchen, but his greeting was distant, mechanical, and utterly professional. "Hey, Dad, just leave your coat with the house manager." I immediately noticed the atmospheric pressure drop. There was a tension I couldn't quite identify, a cold current running beneath the surface. The large, polished mahogany table was set for 8, yet there were only 6 of us. Alec, Serafina, the kids, myself, and one expected guest. "Is someone else joining us?" I asked, my gaze falling on the extra, highly visible place setting at the head of the table. "Yes, my father will be here in a moment." Serafina answered with that unnerving, joyless smile. She was referring to Graham Thorne, a 72-year-old titan of private equity, a man who had always been my silent, most aggressive competitor in the commodities markets. I considered him the embodiment of the soulless financial engineering I had always fought against. When Graham Thorne arrived, the shift in the room was palpable and sickening. Alec completely transformed, becoming solicitous and deferential in a way he hadn't been with me since he was a frightened boy of 10. "Mr. Thorne, what a genuine honor to host you. Please, come in. We're just about ready to sit down." I thought the display was crass, but I chose to swallow the bitter taste. It was Christmas, and I desperately wanted one last evening of peace with my family. We moved to the table, and I walked toward my usual seat, the one that had been mine for years, ever since Eleanor passed and the family dinners moved to Alec's house. It was the place of the patriarch, at the head of the table, next to my son. But as Graham Thorne approached, Alec looked at me with an expression that froze the blood in my veins. Cold, calculating, and ruthless. It was the look of a man who sees an obstacle and calculates its removal. "Dad, I need you to get up from there," Alec stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "What?" I asked, confused, the words sticking in my throat. "Why?" "That seat is reserved for Mr. Thorne. He is our guest of honor. This is a business arrangement we are finalizing tonight." I felt the blow like a physical punch to the solar plexus. The sheer audacity was staggering. It's my seat, Alec. It's my place in this family. The tension in the room thickened until it felt like a heavy, poisonous smoke. Serafina stared at the floor, uncomfortable but complicit. The children had stopped their quiet chatter, their eyes wide with confusion. Graham Thorne stood there, a predator watching the trap spring shut, a mix of awkwardness and supreme, undeniable satisfaction playing on his face. "Dad, don't make this difficult." "Move." "I don't understand. Alec, what exactly is going on here?" That's when it happened. Fueled by a desperate need to assert his new allegiance, Alec walked over, put his hands on my shoulders, and pushed. Not a gentle nudge, but a deliberate, forceful shove. My 70-year-old body, trained to withstand the volatility of the market but not the betrayal of a son, lost its balance instantly. I crashed heavily to the cold, polished marble floor in front of the entire family. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. It was the sound of a relationship snapping. Lucas and Eliza screamed my name, their innocence shattered. Serafina clapped her hands over her mouth, a theatrical gesture of shock. Graham Thorne remained motionless, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, betrayed him. They radiated pure, unadulterated triumph. From the floor, aching and utterly humiliated, I heard the words that would change everything forever, delivered with a chilling finality. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out." In that moment, lying on the cold marble, something inside me didn't just break. It solidified. The unconditional love, the image of my son as my heir and protégé, the legacy I had built for him. It all crumbled like dried desert earth. What replaced it was not mere sadness, but a fierce, bone-deep anger that was cold and precise, like the sharpest scalpel. The children, bless them, helped me up, their faces etched with confusion and pain. "Are you okay, Grandpa?" Eliza whispered, tears blurring her eyes. "I'm fine, sweetie," I lied, stroking her hair, the tenderness a shield against the internal storm. Alec was already sitting in his own chair, taking his place as the host, as if the dramatic assault had been a necessary formality. Graham Thorne occupied my chair, accepting his prize without a word. Serafina served the dinner, her movements jerky, avoiding my gaze completely. I was relegated to a side chair, a temporary, irrelevant guest in a house I had financially secured. During the entire dinner, I watched. I watched how Alec spoke to Thorne with a reverence he had never once shown me. I watched how Serafina hung on every word of the man who now sat in my place of authority. I watched how my grandchildren looked at me with sorrowful confusion, unable to process why their father had so casually destroyed their grandfather's dignity. And as I watched, absorbing the full weight of their collective betrayal, I made a silent vow, a decision born of cold fury that would irrevocably alter the course of all our lives. The dinner proceeded in a dense, tense atmosphere. Every bite of the overcooked duck tasted like a deliberate insult. Every laugh shared between Alec and Thorne pierced my soul like shrapnel. My grandchildren tried, bless their innocent hearts, to inject normalcy with comments about school, but even they could feel that the foundation of our family had been cracked beyond repair. Lucas got straight A's this semester, I commented, throwing a lifeline, trying to establish some vestige of my role. Oh, right, Alec replied, not even glancing at me, his focus entirely on his new patron. Mr. Thorne, is the duck cooked exactly to your liking? We flew it in from France. It was as if I had dissolved into the furniture, a ghost at my own table. For 45 years, I had molded this man, taught him the value of a handshake and the power of integrity. I had given him everything, and he was treating me like an annoying vagrant at his own feast. When the miserable meal concluded, I excused myself discreetly. I'm just going to use the powder room for a moment. No one acknowledged me. They were deep in a discussion about leveraged acquisitions and the Asian markets, a conversation from which I, the man who had built the entire company, was clearly excluded. I walked toward the bathroom slowly, but my mind was operating at an alarming velocity. Once inside, I locked the door and stared at my reflection. The man staring back had eyes red not from sorrow, but from a crystalline, cold anger that was hardening into pure, lethal determination. I pulled out my secure satellite phone and began dialing numbers I knew by heart, the numbers of the most loyal, powerful individuals in my circle. The first call was to Henry Shaw, my personal counsel for 30 years. His sleepy, cultured voice answered on the third ring. Victor, it's Christmas Eve. Is the world ending? Henry, I need you to prepare documents first thing tomorrow morning to revoke every power of attorney Alec holds in Sterling Group. All of them, without exception. I want his access to the corporate reserves terminated immediately. There was a long, professional pause. Henry knew the delicate structure of my estate. Victor, are you absolutely sure? That would make him utterly powerless within the company. I know exactly what it means. Henry, I also want you to begin the immediate legal procedure to cancel every financial guarantee I've co-signed for him. The Dallas penthouse, the Bentley, the corporate credit lines, everything. What happened? My son just defined his character for me tonight. Now, I am about to define his consequences. The second call was to Clara Bell, my chief financial officer, a woman whose loyalty was built on cold, hard respect. Clara, I apologize for this call. I need you to freeze all joint accounts with Alec first thing in the morning. Also, suspend his entire executive compensation package and all benefits. He is to receive nothing. Is there a solvency issue, Mr. Sterling? No, Clara. I'm simply taking back control of what is fundamentally mine. I am decoupling my financial empire from his moral deficit. The third call was the most strategic. I dialed Marcus Hale, my second in command, a competent and loyal operator who had been with me since the first Wildcat oil fields. Marcus, forgive the hour. Could you go to the headquarters early tomorrow? I need you to remove every single personal item of Alex from his corner office. The diplomas, the family photos, the custom polo trophies, everything. Are you terminating him, boss? He is no longer the chief executive officer. You will assume the COO role with expanded authority starting tomorrow. Prepare an immediate termination letter. Justifiable cause, loss of confidence and material conflict of interest. Understood. Marcus? Understood. Mr. Cho, Sterling, anything else? Yes. Place a note on his desk, centered on his blotter. It must read, This office is not for you. I want the message to be unequivocal. After the calls, I remained in the bathroom, organizing the rest of my moves. I was not seeking revenge, but a surgical, necessary justice. For 40 years, I had worked 18-hour days to build a dynasty of security, and my own flesh and blood had just shown me that my entire sacrifice was worth less than a table seat for a new ally. I returned to the dining room, my face composed in a calm smile that concealed the brewing storm. The conversation had shifted back to the European energy futures, completely ignoring my absence. The markets are very volatile in the North Sea, Graham Thorne commented, swirling his expensive cognac. Exactly, Alec agreed, his voice thick with enthusiasm. That's why a merger between Sterling Group and your private equity firm would be mutually beneficial. A merger. They were plotting to merge my life's work with Graham Thorne's leveraged debt machine without even a whisper of consultation. A merger? I asked, my voice dangerously level. Alec looked at me as if he'd forgotten I was still breathing the same air. Oh, yeah, Dad. Mr. Thorne and I have been discussing expansion possibilities for my company. Well, technically, I'm the CEO, he replied, finishing with an arrogant, dismissive smirk. Technically, I repeated slowly, letting the word hang in the air, tasting its betrayal. Graham Thorne intervened, his voice slow and condescending. Victor, you understand that modern business requires fresh approaches. Alec has innovative ideas. I'm sure he does, Graham, I replied, maintaining a composure that felt like a painful physical effort, while mentally documenting every word for the coming execution. I think it's time for me to leave, I finally announced, rising stiffly from my despised side chair. Sure, Dad. Get some rest. Alec replied without looking up from the cigar he had lit, not even bothering to offer a pretense of courtesy. It was Lucas who came rushing down the stairs. Are you leaving already, Grandpa? I thought you were staying late, like you always do. No, kiddo. I have very important things to do tonight. Are you upset about what happened at dinner? My grandson's question, so direct and innocent, was the sharpest dagger of the night. Even a teenager had instantly grasped the profound injustice. I'm not upset, Lucas. I am deeply disappointed. But sometimes, disappointments teach us the most enduring truths. I squeezed his shoulder. You'll understand soon, son. I love you very much. Always remember that. I left that house feeling a strange, chilling sense of clarity. The cold Houston air filled my lungs as I walked to my car. In the driver's seat, before starting the engine, I made one final, crucial call. Law offices of Pearson Mason. This is Victor Sterling. Forgive me for bothering you on Christmas Eve, but I need to change my will, effective immediately. Yes, it's urgent. Very urgent. As I drove home, a grim smile formed on my face for the first time. Alec had played his hand, believing the power lay in his title. But he had forgotten one fundamental, immutable detail. I was the one who had written the code for the entire system, and tomorrow he would discover the true rules. I arrived home just past midnight. Sleep was impossible. While the rest of Houston celebrated Christmas, I was preparing for the final, necessary battle. I turned on every light in my home study and spread out 4 decades of legal documents across my mahogany desk. My first task was to confirm the structural integrity of my power. Alec never owned a single share of Sterling Group stock. He was CEO purely by my appointment and subject to my immediate revocation. His authority was a ghost, a title dependent entirely on my will, and that will had just been fundamentally altered by his act of betrayal. My phone rang. It was Clara Bell, my CFO. Mr. Sterling, I've been reviewing the accounts since we spoke. There's something you need to know urgently. Tell me, Clara. Alec has been using the company's financial guarantees for personal liabilities far greater than we estimated. The Dallas penthouse where he lives has an $800,000 mortgage co-signed by you. His Bentley Continental GT, $180,000. And the corporate credit cards. Victor, he owes over $350,000 in personal expenses. He treated the company as his private bank. The information was an affirmation of my worst suspicions. Betrayal was a habit, not a moment. Is he behind on any payments? Several. Without your guarantees, he will be in immediate default. The banks will initiate foreclosure and repossession procedures the moment they open tomorrow. Perfect. Cancel all the guarantees at dawn. Are you absolutely certain this will dismantle his financial house completely? Victor, he will be left with virtually nothing liquid. His entire lifestyle is built on your collateral. It will be a total financial ruin. Clara, my son ruined something far more valuable last night. Our future. Now he will learn what consequences feel like in the cold reality of the market. I hung up and continued reviewing documents, confirming the termination of his ludicrous $60,000 per month salary, his expense accounts, and all other executive benefits. All of it would disappear within hours. At 4:02 in the morning, I reviewed 5 years of internal audits. What I discovered filled me with a deep, weary disappointment mixed with the cold rage. Alec had been systematically siphoning off small commissions, using company contacts for his own private consulting projects, and taking undeclared conflicts of interest for years. His disrespect was not born of one frustrated moment. It was a slow, chronic cancer of the soul. At 5:00 a.m., I called Henry, my lawyer. Henry, the paperwork for wrongful termination. Victor, I have proof of misuse of corporate funds, improper resource allocation, and undeclared conflicts of interest. Do you think he will dare challenge this in court and expose his own fraud? I understand. The documents will be ready at 8:00 sharp. Also, finalize the papers to transfer ownership of the Dallas penthouse that is in Alec's name. It was a wedding gift registered as a zero-interest family loan. I want it back. The apartment where he currently lives? Precisely. Let him learn to pay rent and manage a budget like any normal person forced to earn his own way. At 7:00 in the morning, I made the final, crucial calls to the major financial institutions. On Chase Bank, this is Victor Sterling. I need to immediately cancel all financial guarantees I've co-signed for Alec M. Sterling. Mortgage loans, credit cards, everything. Mr. Sterling, that will trigger immediate execution against the primary debtor. I am perfectly aware. Proceed immediately. At 8:00 a.m., Henry arrived at my house. I signed each paper with unyielding determination. Cancellation of executive powers, revocation of banking authority, immediate termination of directorial duties, recovery of assets provided as family loans. Victor, once you sign this, the relationship is irrevocably severed. There is no going back. Henry, I said, signing the last document at 8:30 a.m. A few hours ago, my son pushed me to the floor in front of my grandchildren to replace me with a business rival. Do you believe there is anything left to go back to? At 9:30 a.m., Clara called. Mr. Sterling, all guarantees have been officially cancelled. The banks will begin execution proceedings starting at 10:00 a.m. His life is officially in freefall. At 5 minutes to 10, I put on my finest charcoal suit. Today was not a day for sadness or celebration. It was the day Alec M. Sterling would discover what the word consequences truly meant. I watched the Houston sun rise from my study window. There was no trace of the pain or sadness from the night before, only a terrifying, crystal-clear clarity. The storm had begun. Alec woke up that Christmas morning with a strange, unsettling feeling. Serafina was already up, mechanically preparing their extravagant breakfast. The house felt charged with an invisible tension. At 10:15 a.m., the calls began. Mr. Sterling, this is Bank of America. The primary guarantee on your penthouse loan was canceled this morning. The loan is in a state of immediate demand for payment. Mr. Alec Sterling, Wells Fargo Risk Department. Your corporate line of credit has been suspended due to cancellation of guarantees. You must report to our offices immediately. Citibank, Chase Bank, U.S. Bank, 47 calls in total. His financial world was imploding in real time. Serafina watched with growing horror. What is happening? Alec, why so many calls? I don't know, he mumbled, but the terrible suspicion was forming. His own words from the night before, technically, I'm the CEO, now tasted like ashes. He drove his Bentley 7 Series, completely unaware that the dealership had already received the repossession order. He arrived at the Sterling Group tower. He took the elevator to the executive floor, only to find Marcus Hale, my loyal second, sitting behind his desk. Marcus, what are you doing in my office? Alec demanded. Marcus looked up, his expression uncomfortable but resolute. Good morning, Alec. This isn't your office anymore. What do you mean? Read the note on the desk. Alec walked over and saw it, centered on the leather surface, my precise handwriting. This office is not for you. The words were the exact, surgical repayment for his act of humiliation. He felt his legs give way. Marcus, this has to be a joke. I am the CEO. Not anymore. Alec, Mr. Sterling appointed me COO this morning. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal items from storage and leave. The termination papers are filed. Justifiable cause. Loss of confidence and conflict of interest. Alec felt the world spin. He pulled out his phone to call me, but Marcus handed him a sealed envelope. The letter inside, typed on Sterling Group letterhead, was chillingly final. Alec, the consequences of our actions sometimes arrive when we least expect them. Last night you showed me that my place in your life no longer exists. Today I am showing you that your place in my company doesn't, either. You have until noon to vacate any property that is in my name, including the Dallas penthouse and the Bentley. You will now learn to live on your own resources, as you should have years ago. This decision is final and irrevocable. Your father, who no longer recognizes the man you have become. Victor Sterling. Alec walked out of the corporate building like a sleepwalker. In the parking lot, the tow truck was already hooking up his Bentley. He argued, he pleaded, but the driver showed him the court order for repossession. The lease was in default, and the guarantor was gone. The subsequent weeks were agonizing. I did not soften. The purpose of this act was not merely to punish, but to teach a lesson so brutal it could never be forgotten. I knew through reports that Alec and Serafina had been forced to move into a modest apartment. The children, Lucas and Eliza, were deeply distressed. The most difficult calls were to my grandchildren. I spoke to them often, assuring them my love was separate from their father's actions. I established trust funds for their education, funds that Alec could not touch, ensuring their future was secure, a small act of measured mercy amidst the wreckage. 1 month after the catastrophic Christmas, a letter arrived for me. It was handwritten, unpretentious, and contained none of his usual arrogance. Dad, I received the final legal papers. I won't contest them. I know I was wrong. Not just wrong in what I did that night, but in how I've treated you and the company for years. I saw Sterling Group as my birthright, not my responsibility. I saw you as an obstacle, not a partner. I've sold the few assets I could salvage, and I'm working 2 jobs to cover Serafina's expenses and keep us afloat. I'm also attending grief and behavioral counseling. It's not about the money anymore. It's about realizing that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life out of pure greed and entitlement. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I would appreciate it if we could meet publicly for a coffee sometime, just to talk about Lucas and Eliza. Your son, Alec. I read the letter 3 times. My cold anger finally began to thaw, replaced by a profound, weary compassion. The lesson had landed. The consequence had initiated the necessary growth. I wrote back the next day on a simple piece of notepaper, not company letterhead. Alec, I received your letter and have read it. I am glad to know that you are taking steps towards self-reliance and growth. That growth is exactly what I had hoped the consequences would yield. I am not ready to resume a personal relationship right now, and perhaps I never will be. The damage you inflicted was too deep for a quick fix. However, for the sake of the children, I agree to meet you for coffee at the Old Central Diner next Wednesday at 10:00 a.m. Here are my non-negotiable terms. I will buy the coffee. No other financial transactions will occur. We will only discuss a plan for the next week, focusing on your efforts to manage your life and communicate with the children. Any discussion of the company, any manipulation, any disrespect, or any attempt to use the children as leverage will result in the immediate and permanent termination of all contact. I am proud of the man you are choosing to become. Stay on that path. Earn your way back into your own life. Victor Sterling. I drove to the diner that Wednesday morning. Alec arrived, looking thinner, but standing straighter. We sat down, not as father and son, but as 2 businessmen reviewing a difficult turnaround project. We spent the hour creating a list on a small spiral notebook. Must pay, must earn, must ask. The focus was entirely on his responsibility, paying rent, securing stable income, and managing his budget. It was not a cinematic ending. There were no hugs, no tears, and no easy forgiveness. It was merely a blueprint for a week, a chance to prove that the bitter lessons had taken root. I left the diner and walked to my car, feeling a profound sense of closure. I hadn't destroyed him. I had stripped away his crutches, forcing him to stand. True forgiveness was not about instantly erasing the debt, but about creating the conditions for the debtor to earn his own dignity back. My home was safe. My boundaries were clear. I knew, finally, that love is not a soft blanket. Love is the porch light left on and the deadbolt that works, and the knowledge that the consequence was a lesson, not an execution. The war was over, and the only man who had truly won was the one who had learned the hard-won value of earning his own seat. Alec, stripped of his dignity and his last vestige of executive authority, had to endure the grim walk to the nearest light rail station, a mode of transport he hadn't touched since he was an undergraduate attempting to project bohemian poverty. During the cramped, anonymous ride back to the suburbs, his phone became a hot cinder in his hand, a non-stop siren of financial ruin. Banks, asset managers, corporate suppliers, all demanding immediate settlement, all echoing the official cancellation of Victor Sterling's ironclad guarantees. When he finally arrived at the penthouse, a structure of glass and steel that was no longer his, he found Serafina hyperventilating on their Italian leather sofa, clutching a formal legal notice. "Alec, 24 hours. We have 24 hours to vacate. They're going to foreclose on the mortgage," she shrieked, her face a mask of primal terror. "What? That's impossible," he gasped, the reality crashing down on him. "Your father canceled all the guarantees. We owe $800,000 that we don't possess. The grace period is 0. Alex sank onto a minimalist chrome chair, utterly defeated. In less than 12 hours, he had lost his career, his $500,000 car, his home, and every last shred of financial stability. But worst of all, he had lost the one thing he always believed was immutable: his status as Victor Sterling's son. The cold, calculated words he had used the night before now echoed in the cavern of his mind like a terminal curse. "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out. Now." He was the one who was out of everything, tossed onto the cold mercy of the outside world. Alex spent the next 2 hours in a daze, trying to grasp the sheer, comprehensive scale of the disaster. Serafina alternated between high-pitched, hysterical weeping and bitter, corrosive reproaches, desperately cramming their most conspicuous jewelry and designer clothes into steamer trunks before the impending eviction deadline. "This is because of your monumental, entitled stupidity," she screamed, her voice cracking as she threw a diamond tennis bracelet into a suitcase. "How could you be so arrogantly foolish? Shoving your own father onto the floor in front of the children and Graham Thorne." "Serafina, lower your voice. This can be fixed. I just need to get through to him. He's my father." Talk, Alec. They have annihilated us. The house, the Bentley, your $40,000 a month job. What are we supposed to tell my parents? Our investors? That question sliced through Alec like a hot wire. Graham Thorne, his powerful father-in-law, had been a direct, silent witness to the humiliation Alec had inflicted. If Graham Thorne valued one thing above all the leveraged buyouts and hostile takeovers in the world, it was the cold, unyielding dignity of the patriarch. Alec picked up his phone with a hand that shook so badly he had to redial 3 times, reaching out to his supposed ultimate ally. He needed support, intercession, a tactical lifeline. "Graham, it's Alec. I need to speak to you urgently." The voice that answered was not merely cold. It was the sound of distant, high-altitude indifference. "Alec, I was expecting your call." "Graham, something truly terrible has happened. My father has acted psychopathically. He seized everything over a meaningless family argument. I need your assistance." There followed a chilling, deliberate silence, the kind that precedes a market execution. "A meaningless argument. Alec, did you hear yourself?" "Well, It was just a misunderstanding. You know how these things are between fathers and sons. A little show of force." "No, Alec, I do not know how these things are, because I would never have disrespected the source of my entire existence the way you disrespected yours last night." The panic in Alec's chest became a physical force. "Graham, please. Serafina is your daughter. The children require stability. I know you can appreciate the gravity of the situation. What I appreciate perfectly is that I witnessed a 45-year-old man publicly humiliate the father who gave him the empire he was running. I saw you violently propel Victor Sterling to the floor to assign me a seat I neither requested nor valued. I genuinely believed, Alec, that you had learned a gesture of respect. You don't cultivate respect by savagely dishonoring your blood, especially not your founder. Alec could hear the growing, undeniable contempt in Thorne's measured tone. His last resort, his final safety net, was being shredded before his ears. Graham, we are family. Teresa, Serafina is your daughter. Lucas and Eliza are your grandchildren. Exactly. And for that very reason, I cannot allow my grandchildren to grow up thinking that kind of behavior, that level of entitlement, is remotely tolerable. Serafina and the children will always have my financial protection. But you, Alec, have definitively demonstrated that you are a man whose character is unstable and fundamentally untrustworthy. What does that even mean? It means that any man capable of betraying his own father is a liability, incapable of loyalty to anyone else. There will be no financial intervention from my firm, no job in my portfolio companies, no sanctuary in my family's residences. Alec felt the floor fall away beneath him. You cannot be serious. I have never been more professional in my life. Furthermore, I have decided to contact Victor to offer him my personal, unreserved apology for having been an unwilling accessory to your deplorable behavior. I will also be proposing a strategic business partnership. Thorne's final words struck Alec like cold, heavy hammers. He had not only lost his father-in-law's support, but Graham Thorne was now aligning his formidable resources directly with Victor Sterling. Graham, please, I beg you to reconsider. I have reconsidered, Alec, and my conclusion is absolutely clear. Victor Sterling is the kind of man I want to do business with. You are not. The line went dead, leaving Alec holding the silent phone, his world reduced to a low, desperate electronic hum. Serafina, who had heard the entire, brutal exchange from the doorway, had all the color drained from her face. Oh, my father is not going to help us, she whispered, the last of her fight leaving her. No, Alec confirmed, the word barely audible. What are we going to do? Alec? Where will we live? The children have their private school. I have my schedule. I don't know. Serafina, I simply do not know. At that precise moment, Lucas and Eliza came downstairs, drawn by the raised voices and the alarming chaos of suitcases and eviction notices strewn across the marble floor. What is happening? Dad? Lucas asked, his 15-year-old voice sharp with worry, sensing his carefully constructed, privileged world was dissolving. Why is Mom crying? Eliza added, her small voice trembling. Alec looked at his children and felt a shame so deep and visceral it eclipsed all the financial ruin. How could he possibly explain that due to his pride and monumental stupidity, their entire stability had been destroyed? Kids, we need to talk very carefully, Serafina began, her voice breaking on the threshold of tears. Is this because of what happened last night with Grandpa Victor? Lucas asked, with a directness that showed his teenage mind had grasped the reality better than Alec's 45-year-old denial. Yes, son, it is entirely because of that. Dad, why did you push Grandpa? Eliza asked, her eyes already pooling with tears. He looked so incredibly sad. Dad. Alec could not speak. The words were choked by his own self-loathing. Grandpa Victor loves us, Eliza continued, her voice small but firm. He always gives us the best attention and tells us amazing stories. Why were you so mean to him? I thought I was showing respect to... You thought what? Dad? Lucas interrupted, his tone dangerously close to contempt. Because it looked to me like you hated him. I don't hate your grandfather. I never have. Alec pleaded. But you certainly treated him like you did, Lucas retorted with a shattering, adult maturity. And now he must hate us too, right? No, son. He loves you. He would never hurt you. Then why can't we stay in our house? Why is Mom packing everything that belongs to us? Alec collapsed onto the sofa, the full weight of his defeat crushing him. His own children, innocent of his crimes, were delivering the final, just verdict. Because Dad made a very, very big mistake, he finally admitted, the words tasting like copper. A mistake that is going to change our entire lives. Can you say sorry to Grandpa? Eliza asked with the profound, heartbreaking innocence of a child who believes all adult problems are solvable with an apology. It's far too late for that, sweetie. The damage is done. Serafina came over and sat next to him, and for the first time all day, her voice held not fury, but a deep, terminal sadness. Alec, I need you to listen. The children and I are moving into my parents' guest annex tonight. I cannot, and I will not, remain here with you after this. I cannot be married to a man who is capable of humiliating his own father with such profound cruelty. Serafina, we are a family. We are married. No, Alec. A true family unit is built on respect and fundamental values. You proved last night that you possess neither. You chose entitlement over integrity. Alec looked at his wife, his children, the piles of packed belongings, the eviction notice. In less than 24 hours, he had systematically detonated his entire life over a fleeting moment of self-aggrandizing arrogance. And the most agonizing realization was that Victor, his father, was right. He had brought this total ruin entirely upon himself. The consequences had arrived, and they were exponentially more devastating than he could have ever conceived. The entire afternoon became the most protracted and painful experience of Alec's existence, while Serafina meticulously packed the children's essential belongings. Alec frantically tried to find a scrap of solvency. His executive checking accounts had been frozen. His primary credit card was a dead piece of plastic. The ATM rejected him, denying him even the $50 he attempted to withdraw from his last personal savings account. He had precisely $300 in cash in his wallet, the last of his former life's reserves. Where exactly are you planning to sleep tonight, Alec? Serafina asked, closing the last of Lucas's suitcases. I don't know. Maybe a short-stay hotel, until I can pull myself together and make a plan. Alec, look at me, Serafina demanded, her gaze cold. Do you truly believe you can pull yourself together after this? Your father is not a man who acts on impulse. This operation was mathematically calculated to be permanent. He's my father, Serafina. Eventually, the blood ties will force him to forgive me, like you forgave him when he made his mistakes. Oh, wait. He never made mistakes with you. He was always perfectly generous, perfectly understanding, and this is exactly how you repay him. Serafina's words, though cruel, were the hardest truth yet. Victor Sterling had been an exemplary, dedicated father and founder, and Alec's response had been pure, unadulterated ingratitude. At 6 p.m, the moving truck Serafina had contracted arrived to transport her and the children's belongings to Graham Thorne's estate. The children watched their furniture and toys being loaded with a quiet, devastating sadness. Is Dad coming with us? Eliza asked, as they strapped her custom pink bicycle into the van. No, sweetie. Dad has to resolve some serious problems first. When is he going to resolve them? Serafina looked at Alec with an expression of accumulated, final disappointment. We don't know, Eliza. We just don't know. Lucas, the more direct teenager, confronted his father bluntly. Dad, are you going to be homeless because of what you did to Grandpa? It's more complicated than that. Son, it's about a lack of liquidity. Doesn't seem complicated to me. You were incredibly mean to him, and now he is punishing you. It's like in school. If you hit someone, you get punished. The brutal, clear simplicity of Lucas's observation proved that a 15-year-old understood the logic of cause and effect better than a corporate CEO. At 7 o'clock, Serafina finished loading all her and the children's effects. The penthouse, just hours before their opulent family home, was now an empty, echoing shell. Alec, I need your signature on these documents. Serafina handed him a folder containing documents drawn up by her lawyer that afternoon. Temporary separation of marital assets and provisional custody of the children. Alec felt the icy dagger twist. You already hired a lawyer? Of course, I did. Did you genuinely believe I would wait around to witness the extent of your implosion? I have an absolute duty to protect the children. Serafina, this is wildly extreme. I just need time to... Time to what? Alec? Time to find another wealthy father you can betray? Time to find another father-in-law whose favor you can buy by humiliating your family? That's your pattern now. That is completely unfair. You know what's unfair, Alec? That my children were forced to watch their father behave like a common savage toward their grandfather. You know what's unfair? That after 15 years of marriage, I had to discover my husband is capable of such calculated cruelty. Alec signed the documents with trembling resignation. He had no option. Without a job, a home, or resources, he was structurally incapable of providing stability for anyone. The children can visit you on weekends once you secure a suitable, stable place to host them, Serafina informed him, filing the papers away. When will that be? When you prove you are a trustworthy, responsible person again, if you ever manage to accomplish that. At 8 o'clock, Alec found himself utterly alone in an empty, echoing house that was no longer his, with $300 in cash and a small suitcase of basic clothes. The rest of his designer wardrobe and personal possessions were boxed up in the Sterling Group corporate storage room, under Marcus Hale's custody. He walked out onto the street and wandered aimlessly through the affluent, Christmas-lit avenues of Houston. Families strolled happily. Couples hugged against the winter chill. Everyone had a home to return to, except him. He eventually found a cheap, transient hotel near the rail terminal where he could secure a room for 3 nights for $200. He had precisely $100 left for food and transport. The room was small, with a lumpy single bed and a window overlooking a dark alleyway. He sat on the bed and contemplated the terrifying magnitude of his destruction. His phone rang. It was an unknown number. Alex Sterling? Yes. This is Patricia Reyes from the law firm Reyes and Associates. Your father, Mr. Victor Sterling, has retained us to officially notify you that any attempt at direct or indirect contact with him will be considered legal harassment. What? He's my father. Mr. Sterling has been unequivocally clear. He does not wish to receive calls, messages, visits, or intermediaries from you. Any violation of this instruction will result in a court-ordered restraining order. The call ended, leaving Alec with the final, horrifying realization that his father had not only financially obliterated him, but had completely and legally severed the blood tie. He looked at his reflection in the hotel bathroom mirror. The man staring back looked 10 years older, unshaven, defeated, the crumpled suit hanging loosely on his frame. He looked exactly like what he was, a former titan who had lost everything due to his own profound immaturity. That night, lying sleepless in the unfamiliar, anonymous bed, Alec reflected on the 24 hours that had entirely redefined his existence. Just 2 days ago, he was a celebrated CEO, living in a palace, driving a Bentley, respected, and financially invincible. Now he was a man with no home, no job, no family, no resources, and absolutely no foreseeable future. And all of it, every loss, had been precipitated by a moment of arrogant, unforgivable hubris that lasted less than 30 seconds. The words echoed, "This seat belongs to my father-in-law. Get out." Now he was the one who was out of everything. 3 days after the Christmas disaster, as Alec attempted to process his new, terrifying reality in the cramped hotel room, he received an unexpected call that shifted his entire perspective. "Dad?" It was Lucas's voice, small and emotional. "Son, how are you? How did you get this number?" "I'm using Mom's burner phone. Dad, I need to tell you something important. Grandpa Victor came to see us." Alec's heart hammered against his ribs. Victor had gone to Graham Thorne's estate? Yes, yesterday afternoon. Mom wasn't there. She was out with her father. Grandpa Anthony, Graham, welcomed him into the main sitting room like he was a visiting dignitary. You should have seen it. What happened? Dad? I'd never seen Grandpa Victor look so intense, so sad, but he also looked different, stronger, like he had just signed a major contract. Alec closed his eyes, visualizing the scene. His father handling the extreme situation with the measured dignity that had always defined his power. "Go on, son." He asked Eliza and me to sit with him on the big sofa. He explained that what happened with you had absolutely nothing to do with us, that his love for us was the same as it always was. Unconditional. What else did he say? Lucas? He said that sometimes adults make decisions that have very serious consequences, but that grandchildren are never responsible for their parents' choices. Victor's words were the ultimate expression of the man's moral code. Even in his searing pain and anger, he was carefully protecting the children from the fallout of the adult conflict. Eliza asked him if he was mad at us, Lucas continued, and he told her he could never be angry with us because we had done nothing wrong. How did your mother react when she got back? She was incredibly nervous. I think she was afraid Grandpa Victor would blame her for what you did, but he was very courteous to her. He told her he entirely understood and validated her decision to separate from you. Alec felt another sharp thrust of pain. His father hadn't just cut him off. He was ratifying the decisions of every person who was abandoning him. "Dad, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Lucas." "Anything. Why did you do it? Why were you so pointlessly cruel to Grandpa?" The direct, honest question from his 15-year-old son forced Alec to confront the truth he had been desperately avoiding. There was no excuse. "Son, I thought I was doing what was necessary. I thought showing total respect to Grandpa Graham was important for my business future. But Dad, showing respect to one person doesn't mean you have the right to savagely disrespect another. I learned that principle when I was 10. The simple, profound wisdom of his teenage son hit Alec like an actual revelation. A 10-year-old understood basic concepts of human integrity that he, at 45, had completely abandoned. "You're right, Lucas. I made a profound mistake. Can you fix it?" "I don't know, son. Your grandfather is profoundly wounded. But you're also wounded, right? Mom says you lost your job and the penthouse." "Yes, I lost a great deal of what defined me. Did you lose them, or were they taken away as a punishment? Again, the brutal, unsparing clarity of the teenager. Lucas understood perfectly that Alec's consequences were not accidents of fate, but direct, logical results of his own actions. They were taken away as a punishment, son. Exactly like when they confiscate your gaming system when you break the house rules. And do you genuinely think you deserved it? Alec fell silent for a long, agonizing moment. It was the first time anyone had asked him that question directly, and the first time he had allowed himself to answer it honestly. Yes, Lucas, I believe I deserved it. Then maybe Grandpa isn't being cruel. Dad, maybe he's just being fair. His son's words were more devastating than all the financial humiliations combined. A teenager had articulated the fundamental, self-evident truth he had refused to accept. Victor wasn't acting out of vengeance. He was acting out of justice. Dad, are you still there? Yes, son, I'm here. Grandpa Victor told us something else, too. He said we would have to choose if we wanted to maintain a relationship with him or with you, because he was never going to be in the same place as you ever again. What did you both decide? We told him that it was unfair to make us choose, that you are our father and he is our grandfather, and that we love you both, even if you have major, terrible problems. How did he react to that? His eyes actually welled up. He hugged us both really tightly and said we were exceptionally wise children. Then he proposed something. What was the proposal? That we could see him every Wednesday afternoon and Sunday morning, but that we could never talk about you with him, or about him with you, like separate, sealed compartments. Alec felt a complex mix of relief and crushing sadness. His father had found a strategic way to maintain his bond with his grandchildren without compromising his absolute decision to sever ties with his son. Did you agree to those terms? Yes, but Dad, it feels really strange. It's like living two different lives. I'm sorry, son. I am so profoundly sorry I put you into this horrible situation. Are you going to at least try to fix things with him? I can't. Lucas, your grandfather has explicitly made it clear he wants nothing to do with me. You're not even going to make the attempt? How can I attempt anything if he's legally forbidden me from even being near him? I don't know, Dad, but Grandpa Victor always says that difficult problems require creative, non-obvious solutions. After hanging up with Lucas, Alex sat on the cheap hotel bed, numbly processing the conversation. His children had achieved a measure of peace, but only at the cost of compartmentalizing their lives, all because of his moment of self-destructive arrogance. What struck him most was the stark, profound emotional maturity the children had displayed, a dramatic, humiliating contrast to his own emotional immaturity at 45. That afternoon, walking the downtown streets, desperately searching job postings on his phone, Alec began to comprehend something fundamentally important. The challenge was not simply to get back the money, the job, or the house. The challenge was to become a person who genuinely deserved to get them back. And that, he realized, was the most difficult, arduous task of his entire life. Because it was vastly easier to regain a corporate title, a car, or a bank balance than to regain the trust and respect of a man he had completely and publicly betrayed. Especially when that man was Victor Sterling, and he had every legitimate reason in the world not to grant his son a single second chance. 2 weeks after his life's collapse, Alec had nearly exhausted his entire meager financial reserve. The last $100 had vanished on cheap, basic food and endless bus fares as he frantically searched for any type of employment across Houston. His meticulously polished resume, once a guaranteed key due to the sterling name and his CEO title, was now being systematically rejected by the city's corporate world. The Houston energy and commodities sector was a tightly knit, small community, and the news of his spectacular, humiliating downfall had spread with the speed of a pipeline burst. Chukiamta, we are terribly sorry, Mr. Sterling, but we don't have any openings that align with your background at this time, they would say in every executive office, their polite smiles barely concealing the true message. No one wanted to hire the son who had assaulted and betrayed Victor Sterling. On January 4th, with no money left even for another night in the Flophouse Hotel, Alec was forced to swallow his pride in a way he had never once imagined possible. He applied for a job at an industrial cleaning and maintenance company operating on the far, desolate outskirts of the city. Previous cleaning experience? Asked Brenda Sanchez, the 45-year-old supervisor conducting the interview, her face etched with the weariness of true, hard labor. No, but I am an exceptionally fast learner, and I have an urgent, non-negotiable need for immediate work. Why would someone with your professional background, a CEO, the resume says, be applying for this position? Brenda challenged him, her eyes shrewd. Alec had prepared a simple, partially honest answer. I had irreconcilable differences with my former business partner, and I need to start over from absolute zero. Brenda studied him with a cold assessment. She was a self-made woman who recognized both genuine desperation and the reluctant flicker of humility. The work is brutally hard, Mr. Sterling. The hours are long and antisocial. The salary is $1,200 a month. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Are you entirely certain you can physically handle this? Completely certain, Alec replied, forcing a firm voice. You start tomorrow night. Do not be late. Not once. Because there are 50 other applicants waiting behind you who need this job just as much. That night, Alec started working until dawn, cleaning vast, silent corporate offices. His hands, once accustomed only to signing multi-million-dollar contracts and gripping polished cognac glasses, now handled heavy industrial mops, chemical cleaning products, and biological hazards. His tailored designer suits were replaced by a faded blue uniform bearing the simple, humiliating logo. Brenda's Cleaners, Inc. During those first grueling weeks of graveyard shift work, Alec underwent a strange, unexpected psychological transformation. The forced humility of scrubbing toilets and hauling industrial trash made him reflect on the fundamental concepts he had utterly taken for granted his entire life. The inherent dignity of honest work, the true value of earned effort, and self-reliance. His co-workers were immigrants, single mothers, college students funding their studies, retirees supplementing meager pensions. Not one of them knew his past life, and for the first time in 2 decades, Alec was not being judged by his last name or his family's connections, but solely by his willingness to apply himself to the task. Where are you originally from, David? Asked Miguel, a co-worker from Ecuador, during their short midnight break. From here, from Houston, Alec replied, smoothly using the false name he had given to avoid the scrutiny of the Sterling name. And what did you do before this? I worked in construction and administration, mostly back-office logistics. It was a lie of omission, but it shielded him. Alec had quickly developed the skill of navigating conversations without fully revealing the catastrophic, shameful truth of his former existence. Meanwhile, through the regulated, weekly interactions with his children, Alec learned indirectly about his father's new reality. Grandpa Victor has a new business partner, Eliza commented casually during one of their brief, scheduled phone calls. A new partner? Who? Yeah, Grandpa Graham Thorne. They are working on really large projects together now. Mom says they're going to build massive energy terminals. The irony was devastating. A perfect, exquisite punishment. Graham Thorne, the very man Alec had attempted to ally with by humiliating his father, was now Victor Sterling's direct, strategic business partner. The alliance Alec had tried to violently force had indeed materialized, but it had entirely excluded and ruined him. "Do they see each other often?" Alec asked, trying to keep his tone flat and casual. "Almost every day. They're always talking on the phone. Sometimes they pick us up from school together. They laugh a lot when they talk about their projects." Alec hung up that call, feeling more alone than he had ever been in his privileged life. He hadn't just lost his father, Victor Sterling. He had inadvertently catalyzed a genuine friendship and a powerful business partnership between Victor and Graham Thorne that would likely never have existed without his catastrophic, self-serving intervention. A month after starting the soul-crushing cleaning job, Alec had developed a routine that provided a basic, if precarious, sense of stability. He was sharing a cramped room in a cheap, student-filled apartment in the Montrose neighborhood of Houston, paying $400 a month in rent. His entire budget was ruthlessly limited to cheap, basic food, public transport fares, and the carefully scheduled calls to his children. The physical transformation was stark. He had lost significant weight due to the combination of relentless physical labor and a diet consisting primarily of canned soup and dry toast. His custom-made suits were gone, replaced by simple, practical, inexpensive work clothes. His hands, once soft from a lifetime of office work, were now heavily calloused and scarred from wielding mops and industrial cleaning chemicals. But the psychological transformation was deeper and more profound. The experience of losing absolutely everything had forced him to fundamentally reevaluate what truly constituted personal worth and dignity. For the very first time in his adult life, Alec was surviving solely on the basis of his own grueling, back-breaking effort, completely detached from the family's immense safety net or his privileged corporate connections. One brutally long night, while meticulously cleaning the executive offices of the Chase Tower, he paused in front of a window that offered a stunning, panoramic view of Houston. The city spread out before him, a vast expanse of prosperity, illuminated potential, and distant dreams. He remembered the times he had looked at similar, breathtaking views from the corner office of his old corporate headquarters, smugly believing that his success was the singular result of his own superior talent and personal merit. Now, he understood the cold truth. It had been the automatic result of inherited privilege and perfectly timed, gifted opportunities. The difference was that now, every single dollar he earned represented real, physical sweat, genuine, learned humility, and honest effort. For the first time since that agonizing Christmas night, Alec began to feel the unfamiliar warmth of hope. Not the hope of magically getting his old life back, but the hope of building something entirely new and authentic from the ground up. Something that could, perhaps, one day, make even a man of Victor Sterling's towering integrity proud, even if that man was no longer there, or ever would be, to witness it. March arrived in Houston with the first, faint promise of spring humidity, and Alec had been working at Brenda's Cleaners for 3 arduous months. His life had settled into a stark, simple, but profoundly dignified routine, working all night, sleeping through the morning, tirelessly searching for new, professional growth opportunities in the afternoons, and maintaining his crucial, regular contact with his children through their carefully scheduled phone calls. It was during one of those desperate, frustrating afternoons of job searching that something occurred that would completely recalibrate his perspective on the entire family situation. Alec had just left a failed interview at a small renovation company in an industrial park and decided to take a slow, meditative walk through Memorial Park to clear the lingering bitterness before heading back to his shared room. The fresh air and the first timid, green buds on the trees provided a brief, fragile moment of genuine peace amidst his relentlessly difficult circumstances. As he walked along a quiet path, he saw a scene that stopped him dead in his tracks, freezing him completely. On an ornate, antique park bench near a fountain, Victor Sterling and Graham Thorne were sitting together, talking animatedly, surrounded by large, intricate architectural plans spread out on a portable folding table. Both powerful men looked completely relaxed, smiling freely, clearly and genuinely enjoying their collaborative professional endeavor. What struck Alec most forcibly was not merely seeing them together, but observing the visible, profound transformation in his father. Victor looked truly rejuvenated, energetic, possessing a visible vitality Alec did not recall seeing in him for years. His gestures were lively and expressive as he pointed out details on the plans. His eyes shone with a genuine, infectious professional enthusiasm. From his hidden vantage point behind a cluster of tourists and an enormous oak tree, Alec managed to overhear fragments of their conversation. The core structure can easily support 2 additional stories without any structural problem, Victor was saying, tracing lines on the plans with a bright red pencil. Brilliant, Victor. Your deep foundation experience is exactly the strategic component we critically needed for this entire project. I have to be honest, working with you has been one of the very best professional decisions of my entire career. I completely agree. Graham, we should have done this years ago, Victor replied, a deep sincerity in his voice. You know what? I think this partnership is going to be far more successful than either of us could have ever anticipated. Alec felt a simultaneous, sharp pang of pain and a cold, clear recognition. His father had found not only a business partner in Graham, but seemingly a genuine, authentic friend. The easy camaraderie between the 2 powerful men was instantly evident and entirely natural. What was most devastatingly painful for Alec was the realization that his father looked happier and more fulfilled now than he had in years. Losing his son hadn't destroyed Victor. It had, instead, unexpectedly liberated him to form new, more authentic, and deeply satisfying relationships. As he watched the scene unfold, Alec remembered Graham Thorne's icy words to him on the phone weeks ago. Victor Sterling is the kind of man I want to do business with. You are not. Now, Alec finally understood the full, uncompromising meaning of that statement. It was not merely about professional competition or financial convenience. It was about mutual respect between men of similar, unyielding integrity. And how are the grandchildren holding up? Graham asked, as he carefully rolled up one of the plans. Lucas and Eliza are absolutely extraordinary, smart, incredibly resilient, and mature far beyond their years. They've handled this whole messy family situation with a quiet wisdom that constantly amazes me, Victor responded, a deep tenderness in his voice. That, Michael, is the result of the stellar upbringing you made sure they had all these years. I hope so, Graham. They are absolutely not to blame for their father's destructive decisions, Victor concluded. Alec felt a sharp sting of tears in his eyes. His father was still actively protecting and profoundly loving his grandchildren, even while maintaining his firm, unshakable position regarding his son. Do you ever feel the slightest temptation to reconcile with Alec? Graham asked, with a note of genuine, professional curiosity. Victor was silent for a long, reflective moment, contemplating the calm, reflective waters of the pond. Graham, for 43 years, I truly believed I knew my son. I thought I had successfully raised a man of values, of principles, a man with profound respect for family. On that Christmas night, I discovered I was fundamentally wrong. People can change. Victor, I see that potential in you. They can change. Graham, they absolutely can. But real change requires real consequences that are proportional to the offense. If I simply forgive him easily, what enduring lesson does he actually learn? What critical, foundational message do my grandchildren receive about what constitutes acceptable behavior in a family? I completely see your point, Victor. It is not my intent to punish him forever. Graham, it is about him finally, truly understanding the monumental value of what he so carelessly destroyed. Maybe one day, he will finally show that he has genuinely learned that lesson. But that day, my friend, has certainly not arrived yet, Victor stated, closing the matter. Alec walked quickly away from the park, completely undetected, but his father's powerful words echoed in his mind for days afterward. Victor wasn't being inflexible out of cruelty, but out of deep-seated, consistent educational principles. That night, as he cleaned the pristine executive offices in the financial district, Alec could not stop reflecting on the overheard conversation. His father was waiting for evidence of genuine personal growth, not just desperate, convenient apologies or emotional, manipulative pleas. The hard question he was finally forced to ask himself was, had he truly grown, or was he merely surviving and patiently waiting until he could somehow manipulate his way back to his old status? Over the next painful few weeks, Alec began a brutally honest assessment of his entire transformation process. Was he actively learning authentic humility, or was he just patiently waiting for the storm of consequences to pass? The answer made him profoundly uncomfortable. A powerful part of him was still secretly, desperately hoping his father would eventually give in to emotion and forgive him, allowing him to return to some version of his former life. But the conversation overheard in the park had shown him something critically important. Victor had moved on and prospered. He was not waiting for Alec to return to complete his life. He had successfully built a new, prosperous, and deeply satisfying reality completely without him. If Alec wanted any chance of future reconciliation, he would first have to demonstrate genuine transformation, not simply suffer temporary, unavoidable consequences. And that, he now realized, would require exponentially more time, more effort, and more profound personal growth than he had ever imagined. The real, crucial question was no longer when his father would finally forgive him, but when he would become someone truly worthy of that forgiveness. That crushing realization marked the beginning of a completely different, mature phase in his personal recovery process. December returned to Houston with its characteristic, unseasonal warmth and the familiar, glittering Christmas lights, marking exactly 1 full year since the fateful night that had utterly destroyed Alec's life. As he walked through the illuminated streets after finishing his night cleaning shift, he stopped in front of decorated storefronts, their happy, idyllic family scenes painfully reminding him of everything he had lost. His transformation over those 12 long months had been utterly radical. He was no longer the arrogant, entitled, privileged man who had physically pushed his father to the ground. The physical labor, the crushing financial hardship, and the forced, profound solitude had sculpted a completely different, much humbler version of himself. His heavily calloused hands, his simple, inexpensive clothes, and his face, weathered by nights of hard, honest work, told the silent story of a humility painstakingly learned through suffering. Brenda Sanchez, his supervisor at the cleaning company, had noticed his profound evolution and had recently offered him additional, significant responsibilities. "Alec, I want you to coordinate the entire night team for the new, high-profile contract at the Williams Tower," she had announced the week prior. "Your work has been absolutely impeccable all year, and the client specifically requested your team be assigned to their facilities." The small pay raise, to $1,800 a month, had allowed him to move out of the shared room and into a small, private apartment in a quieter, working-class neighborhood. It wasn't the opulence he was accustomed to, but it was dignity. He had bought humble second-hand furniture, modestly decorated the walls with cherished photos of his children, Lucas and Eliza, and created a humble but profoundly authentic home. His weekly calls with the children had become the single brightest spot in his meager existence. The children had matured significantly during that year, and their conversations reflected an emotional maturity that constantly humbled and amazed him. "Dad, are you actually okay?" Eliza had asked during their last, quiet phone call. "Your voice sounds different. Calmer." "Calmer?" "Yeah. Before, you always sounded like you were frantically rushing to some important place. Now, you sound like you're exactly where you want to be." His 13-year-old daughter's unvarnished observation had struck him with the force of an ethical truth. She was perfectly right. For the first time in decades, Alec wasn't constantly chasing the next impossible achievement, the next promotion, the next material acquisition. "You know what, sweetie? I think you're absolutely right. Are you going to try to talk to Grandpa Victor someday?" "I don't know. Eliza, that critical decision isn't just up to me anymore. There are legal boundaries." "But would you like to, Dad?" Alec reflected carefully before forming his answer. "I would like for him to simply see that I've genuinely changed. Not to get back anything I lost, but so he would know that his son finally learned the fundamental lessons he tried to teach me my whole life." On Christmas Eve, Alec worked his usual, solitary shift in the silent corporate offices of the financial district. As he cleaned the executive floor of one of Houston's most prestigious skyscrapers, he paused in front of the sweeping windows that offered a panoramic view of the city lit up in glittering holiday splendor. A year ago, he had been at a lavish, luxury dinner, surrounded by family and every imaginable material comfort. And yet, he had been profoundly unhappy without realizing it, empty of authentic purpose, completely dependent on external validation to define his own worth. Now, he was utterly alone in an empty office at 3 Xavier M, working for a modest salary, living in a small, rented apartment, but he was experiencing a deep inner peace he had never once known during his years of staggering privilege. His phone suddenly vibrated with an incoming text message from Lucas. "Dad, Grandpa Victor asked about you today." Alec felt his heart leap into his throat. It was the very first indication in 12 months that his father had even acknowledged his existence. He replied immediately. "What exactly did he ask?" "He asked if we knew how you were doing, if you had a job, and if you had a secure place to live." Eliza and Lucas had told him, "You seem to be doing okay, but we didn't know the specific details because you didn't want to worry us." How did he react to that? Lucas replied, "He was very quiet for a long time. Then he just said, 'I hope he is learning what he needs to learn.'" Alec read the message 3 times, his hands shaking slightly. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't an immediate invitation to return. But it also wasn't total, cruel indifference. It was a cautious, distant hope. That night, after finally finishing his work, Alec walked slowly to Christ Church Cathedral, which remained open for late-night Christmas services. He had never been particularly religious in his former life, but the forced solitude and painful reflection of the past year had brought him unexpectedly closer to spirituality. He sat quietly in one of the back pews and contemplated the beautifully illuminated altar. For the first time since that fateful Christmas night, Alec felt he had something truly genuine to be thankful for. He had not recovered his fortune, his social status, his marriage, or his family relationship with his father, but he had found something he hadn't known he'd lost: authentic self-respect. The man who had pushed his father to the floor had been materially rich but profoundly poor in character. The man who now cleaned corporate offices at night had lost the possessions but gained personal dignity. As he left the sanctuary at dawn, Alec made a clear decision he had been agonizing over for weeks. He would not attempt to contact his father directly, strictly respecting the established legal boundaries, but he would write a letter. Not a letter pleading for forgiveness or begging for reconciliation, but a letter of profound gratitude, thanking him for the hard-won lessons, fully acknowledging the cold justice of the consequences he had received, and simply informing him of the genuine personal growth he had achieved. It was a letter that Victor could read or immediately ignore, but that Alec desperately needed to write to complete his process of inner transformation, because he had finally learned that true maturity wasn't about frantically getting what you wanted, but about steadily becoming the man you were meant to be. And for the first time in his adult life, Alec was finally, quietly proud of the man he was becoming. The letter Alec painstakingly wrote during the early hours of Christmas Day became, without question, the most important document of his entire life. It was not written impulsively, but was the result of days of careful, brutal reflection, multiple drafts, and a crushing honesty with himself that he had never once experienced before. He sat at the small, wobbly table in his modest apartment, surrounded by the Christmas silence of a working-class neighborhood, with a cup of cheap coffee and simple paper bought from the corner store. "Dear Victor," he finally wrote, "I know I have absolutely no right to address you, and I completely respect your painful decision not to have contact with me. This letter does not seek a response or reconciliation. I simply need to tell you a few things I've learned during this year that has changed my life forever." And Alec wrote for 4 concentrated hours, detailing not his suffering or his devastating losses, but his genuine process of inner growth. He described his night cleaning job not as a profound humiliation, but as an education in the dignity of honest labor. He explained his modest, humble apartment not as a punishment, but as a hard-won lesson in self-sufficiency. "For 42 years, I truly believed I deserved everything I had simply because I was your son. Now I understand that I deserve absolutely nothing simply for being born with an enormous privilege. Respect is only earned through consistent actions, not famous last names. Dignity is built with solid character, not fat bank accounts." He described how he had watched his business partnership with Graham Thorne from a painful distance, and how he had finally understood that his father had found the authentic, respectful collaboration that he, Alec, had never known how to offer. "Seeing you work with Graham taught me something fundamentally critical. You didn't need a spoiled CEO son. You desperately needed a partner who actually respected you as a man. And I was never, ever able to be that man because I was far too busy feeling entitled to everything without having truly contributed anything of genuine worth." The hardest part to write was the full, crushing acknowledgement of his monstrous behavior that Christmas night. "There is no excuse for what I did. Pushing you to the floor in front of your grandchildren was the most cowardly and cruel act of my life. It was not a mistake, Victor. It was a conscious, vile choice to prioritize my fragile social image over your fundamental human dignity. It was pure betrayal, and it deserved exactly the devastating consequences I received. Alec wrote about his children, about how he had learned to value their brief weekly phone calls more than any of his previous professional achievements. Lucas and Eliza have taught me more about emotional maturity in these 12 months than I taught them in their entire childhood. Their profound ability to maintain love for both of us, despite my destructive behavior, demonstrates the excellent, enduring upbringing you gave them for all those years when I was too distracted by my own ego to truly appreciate it. Towards the end of the letter, Alec addressed the future without any pleas or unrealistic expectations. I am not writing to you expecting your forgiveness. Victor, forgiveness is a priceless thing that must be earned through years of consistent, trustworthy behavior, not by pretty words on paper. Nor am I writing hoping you will reverse your decision about our relationship. I completely respect your choice and understand that it is just and entirely necessary. I am writing simply so you will know that your son is finally learning to be a real, self-sufficient man. At 43, for the first time in my life, I am proud of who I am, not just what I have. I work honestly. I live modestly. I authentically love my children, and I deeply respect the people around me. The conclusion of the letter was the part that took him the longest to perfect, condensing his years' worth of suffering into a single, respectful message. If we never speak again, Victor, I want you to know this. I became a much better person because of the consequences you imposed. Not in spite of them, but entirely because of them. That is a far more valuable gift than any material inheritance you could have ever given me. You gave me the long overdue opportunity to finally discover my own genuine worth, completely separate from your achievements and your generosity. Thank you for being the father I never knew I needed, strong enough to let me fall when it was absolutely necessary, wise enough to protect my children from my mistakes, and just enough to treat me exactly as I deserved to be treated. With deep respect and eternal love, your son who is finally growing up, Alec. He sealed the letter in a plain, simple envelope and wrote the address of the family home where he had grown up. He didn't send it immediately, but kept it on his table for a week, rereading it each night to ensure every word genuinely reflected his profound, newfound feelings. On January the 2nd, he walked to the nearest post office and sent the letter via certified mail. 3 weeks later, he received a reply that consisted of a single, small sheet of paper in his father's familiar, precise handwriting. Alec, I received your letter and have read it several times. I am glad to know that you are well and that you are growing as a person. That growth is exactly what I had hoped would happen. I am not ready to resume a personal relationship, and perhaps I never will be. But I want you to know that I am proud of the man you are choosing to become. Stay on that path, Victor. Alec kept that reply as his most treasured possession. It wasn't full reconciliation, but it was acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was respect. And for the first time since that terrible Christmas night, Alec felt a profound, complete peace. He had learned that some deeply broken relationships cannot be fully repaired, but genuine personal growth is always, always possible. He had discovered that the most important approval is one's own, and that authentic human dignity comes from living by solid, consistent principles, not from transient material possessions. His father had taught him the most valuable lesson of his entire life by simply refusing to rescue him from the hard-earned consequences of his own actions. And Alec had finally learned to be truly grateful for it. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.